Hey, this is driver 88. Last week we drove the very last and now discontinued Audi R8. Very, very sad. This week we're driving the very last and discontinued RS5 Coupe. Something is going on with my beloved Audi RS and it doesn't seem to be good. We are down to 7 different model variants in my country today from Audi RS. When you look at BMW, there's a fully fledged 14 variants of M available. So, given that we looked at the R8 and asked whether Audi had peaked with that last model, I want to know, as I haven't driven one for a very long time, is the RS5 going to just be forgotten and never cared about? Do people actually want a new RS5? Because Audi is not going to build one. So we're going to look at the very last model, RS5. It is a damn good looking thing. Take it for a drive and see whether it's worth remembering or not. So the last RS5. Now back in 2007 when Walter de Silva designed the original base A5 Coupe, he said it was the most beautiful car that he had ever designed. And he designed a bunch of very good looking Alphas as well as the Audi R8. And for me, I think that original car in 2007 still looks really good today. There's a certain sleekness and cohesiveness to that design which is not the same in a C-Class or the M3, M4 coupes. Then of course in 2010 we had the first RS5, the screaming, singing 4.2 litre V8, which has arguably one of the best engine notes in almost any car made. I think particularly when you choose the right exhaust mods. That car was dropped in 2010, and I think the second sort of facelift of that V8 car is one of the best looking Euro coupes that's ever been made. Now after that left us, we had of course this, the 9T RS5, and this is the facelift of the second generation, and being 2023-24, the very last RS5 model. You can tell that this is a facelift because it has a slightly more aggressive front and some other added things like LED lights, as well as an updated interior. Now Audi has decided that this RS5 is no longer worth your money, and they're not going to bother competing with AMG and M, which I think is quite kind of sad. Now the facelift car made no more than the original 9T from 2017, 444 horsepower and 600 newton meters. Now 444 horsepower doesn't sound much today, even for these Euro coupes, when the M4 is making 500 horsepower plus when you actually work out on a dyno how much it's really making. This V6 twin turbo has been around for quite some time, and it still lives on in a way in a hybrid version of the new S5 A5, which used to be called the A4 S4. It's kind of confusing what Audi has done with their naming of all these models. The one thing I know is this car is no longer with us, and from what I can see, it's not going to be produced again. So is it potentially worth looking at one of these as a used example rather than some of the others? Well, one thing's for sure, the sticker price of this car was 170,000 Australian dollars when it first came out. Now this one's asking 130,000 Australian dollars. Both of those figures are before our very large taxes here in Victoria, Australia. Naturally, Euro coupes like these depreciate pretty quickly, but this one being a 23 still has a few years of warranty left. Now, the great thing about these cars, of course, is the Quattro all-wheel drive. Now, 3.6 seconds in perfect conditions was possible with this car. Maybe a sort of high 11-second quarter mile, but let me know what your best time has been with an RS5 Coupe. Tuning is certainly relatively popular with these cars. They have a fair bit of potential, but they're sort of slightly, arguably more fragile than the straight six BMW comparison. They make a bit of an interesting noise. It's kind of hard to put your finger on it. V6s don't usually sound that great, but we'll listen to it in just a second. Now these cars, relatively heavy, something like 1,700 kilos, they're not exactly a track-focused car throughout its whole lifetime. On the Hockenheim GT, this facelift RS5 was about 3 seconds slower than an M4 competition of the G80 variant, but it was about 1.5 seconds faster than the C63S. Generally, this is a bit of a do-it-all sports car. It's got a fair amount of luggage space and comfort, and of course, it's quite fast in a straight line. Now, this is my favorite angle of this generation, or very last generation RS5. There's just a subtlety to its side profile. 20-inch rims. This is actually a square setup, so 275 20-inch wheels all the way around. This car's actually not painted. Of course, I'm just joking. It's Nardo Grey, which is a very popular Audi color. I think I would have mine in white though. I think it's aged quite well, given that this is essentially a design from 2016-17. Now, if you're looking at buying one of the last RS5s, there wasn't a huge amount of options you could pick. Here in Australia, generally we get pretty high spec models and only have one choice. You could get a sunroof. There was also a competition package in some markets where you got stiffened anti-roll bars, you got Pirelli P0s, you got more aggressive steering tuning, I believe, and maybe I think the springs were a little bit different as well. But generally for an RS5, they're not going to be hugely different in characteristics for the last 23-24 model. Now with the interior, we have, I guess, well bolstered side seats with diamond stitch, and we have a circular steering wheel. I'll show you the first previous gen RS5 steering wheel. I kind of prefer a squared off bottom. Other people prefer circular. That's just me. We've got a slightly larger 10-inch screen in the middle here, which was updated, but essentially things kind of do look of their age, of the late 2010s in here, but materials are quite nice. Leather is quite soft, and we've got a little bit of twill on the interior with the Bang & Olufsen sound system. Now, as I own an RS3 myself, I'm quite interested to compare because it's a very different car, my RS3, than this. Obviously V6 and 5-cylinder, but also an 8-speed versus a 7-speed dual clutch. Everything is very different. Also, Haldex kind of all-wheel drive versus real Quattro all-wheel drive. Very, very different cars altogether. Let's take it for a spin. So the RS5 Coupe, the last of its generation. The first thing you certainly notice is how quiet this car is and how reserved it is when it starts up. It's certainly not silent, but it doesn't sort of give too much indication that this is the top of its model range. Getting a bit used to the brake pedal is a little bit spongy and sensitive. Now, getting off the line, mixing this very smooth V6 with the ZF 8-speed, as you can hear, very, very little noise coming in the cabin, and the tire roar, at least with this model, is almost non-existent for an RS car. Everything, of course, like all good RSs do, transforms when you put things into dynamic mode, and even when you're in your normal drive modes and put the gearbox into S, you've got all of that 600 newton meters of torque from 1900 RPM. So essentially it's available all the time. Now, the RS's biggest asset is arguably the launch off the line. It's just so efficient. The 0 to 60 is probably one of the best attributes of this car against its competitors. Quattro all-wheel drive mixed with the super fast ZF 8-speed, and then the down low torque from this V6 twin turbo engine. You know, we drove one of the very last C63S V8s not long ago, and I feel that this just misses not just a V8 sound, but just a little bit of entertainment and character when you're driving it relatively sedately. It's almost just too under the covers. You can't argue about how quickly it picks up and gets down the road though. Now peak torque is at 1900 RPM, but peak power comes in more like 5,700 RPM. So you need to be on it to get the most horsepower out of this car. Sitting at still just 444, which sounds like a much smaller figure than cars you see today. Also, a lot of the cars you see quoted are actually underquoted, and they're making more than 500 horsepower in this segment. Now the big appeal for buying one of these cars, of course, is the all-wheel drive grip. You can just launch it out of the corners, put your foot pretty much all the way down. The systems will manage all the torque and traction for you. Now the gearbox, I've driven so many cars with this ZF 8-speed. This is definitely one of the more entertaining ones. The paddles don't feel great in their action, but I like that when you drop down, it's quite aggressive. I've driven some ZF 8-speed boxes before that just, the tuning doesn't make it too exciting to drive compared to a dual clutch, but this is solid, and it's not really the most latest technology either. I really love the torque that you get in second gear out the box. It's really, really responsive, and it feels, you know, a very bare minimum of 600 Newton meters, almost more than that, given that this isn't a light car. Now the RS5, you could drive this car daily more than easily. It's perfectly comfortable. These bucket seats aren't too hard. You've got good visibility. The fuel consumption is not too high, especially when you're just cruising. There's nothing to say that you couldn't drive this daily and be very, very comfortable in doing so. The rear seats aren't huge, but they're certainly bigger than some of the other 2+2-ish sports cars that I've driven. There's enough room in the boot as well at the rear. So if you want a Euro fast two-door coupe that's brand new in 2025, you're sort of cut down to less options. The RS5, of course, is discontinued. The C63 V8 is discontinued, and I'm not sure if they're even going to do a proper C63 at all. And then you're pretty much left with the M4 competition with its very, very potent S58 straight six engine. And I can see why those BMW M cars are selling so well now, because there's just not as much competition as there used to be. It's an unfortunate thing, but I certainly have a soft spot for these RS5s, for this era of aesthetic and just the brand itself. I hope that they continue to make more RS models, because it's just something missing in the market. This is Driver 88, and we'll see you next time.